That was deep.
Deep. I got real close to the microphone that time.
Yeah, that was a deep can open. What's on the menu tonight?
Rheingeist Truth, one of my faves.
Ooh,
love it.
Good choice.
IPA,
Good choice.
which I'm a sucker for IPAs in the summer. Although this weather is ticking me off. It's like a little spring tease. It was 60 degrees like 2 days ago. Now it's back down to 30s.
Yeah,
Kentucky weather, baby.
That's how it is every year. It was super cold in Louisville today, and it was windy between all the buildings. It got down to it was like 30. The wind chill was like in the high 20s, and the wind was brutal. It was not fun, but I survived, and I'm here to help record this. WGI has 6 weeks left?
6 weeks.
Yeah, exactly 6 weeks till finals, and we've got...
Feels like it goes by so fast once the competitions start, or at least once the regionals start.
Yeah, I think about it. It's March 6th right now when we're recording this, and it's just wild. I feel like you just said, the first show was no time, but the time it took from the season and auditions happening to then, that's an eternity ago if you think about it. November, October, that was a long time ago.
Oh yeah, I mean we're especially thinking when we started with our season, probably over 3/4 of the way through it by now.
Yeah. But yeah, so
the competitions. I think the first regional maybe 3 weeks ago. I don't know. The first WGI regional. I can't believe anybody goes to those. It's so crazy to think people went to that Chicago and Troy, Michigan, have 2 minutes of show on and stuff.
Yeah. No uniforms.
Gosh, I'm glad we didn't do that. Yeah, no uniforms.
No. I think Dayton or which one comes first, Dayton or Indy?
Dayton. We just had it Dayton last weekend.
So
last weekend?
I thought Indy already happened.
Indy's coming up this weekend.
Oh, it's this weekend?
I believe it's either this weekend or next weekend.
Oh, well, I'm done. And then after that...
Actually, it's next weekend. I know for sure.
Okay, well, either way, we'll get into all that for today's episode, which is going to be our initial impressions of WGI 2020. So before we get into diving into what all the groups are doing this year, or the top groups are doing this year, welcome everyone to the Aged Out Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Fantini, and with me as always is...
Evan Worrell. What up?
Yep. Had a little pizzazz on that one today. I like it.
Yeah, dude, I'm just feeling it. I'm in the zone.
So before we get into anything else, thanks for listening as always and following the podcast and all that stuff. Make sure you hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whichever podcast medium you like or prefer. Hit us up on YouTube with the subscribe. Feel free to comment on the video, leave us messages, send us messages on Instagram with suggestions or comments or just questions or whatever you want to do. And as we announced in the last 2 episodes, I'll reiterate, we have a Patreon page now for anyone who wants to give us any kind of financial support they want to. As little as $1 or $2 a month goes a long way over time. We appreciate it, but if you're unable to, we still appreciate the viewership. And without further ado, let's get into WGI 2020. And I don't want to start out on a solemn note, but I have seen on the floor in uniform Rhythm X, MCM, Pulse, and RCC, and I've seen a lot of videos of Broken City. I can't find anything of Broken City.
Well, I don't think that they've gone out in a while. They do have a show this weekend. I don't think it's on the stream in Arizona or something, I believe, but they haven't been to a show in quite a few weeks, I don't believe. Finished up their product, I guess, and just locked it in. So I'm sure it'll be a pretty big leap in stride, compared to what we all saw last time. Hopefully,
but my point is, I have not been impressed with the shows of the 4 groups of the top 5 that I've seen, like X, RCC, Pulse, Mystique. Mystique is just doing stock Mystique. Excuse me. It's just tribal themes, and maybe I don't get it, but we'll get into more detail in a little bit here. But X's show seems a little reminiscent of Man in the Arena. Would I be wrong in saying that?
Yeah, I've had a couple of people send me stuff like, this feels like Man in the Arena Part 2, and I'm like, well, yeah, I can see how you'd say that.
And then Pulse and RCC, I think Pulse's show is better, in my opinion, than RCC's show, but they're both kind of I just don't. I need to see it again. I maybe need to see it live, which won't happen until finals, obviously. But it's
and
just
finished products. Like I haven't seen Pulse's show at all actually, and RCC I only saw the maybe 2/3 of it, so it wasn't done.
I will say
it's really hard for me to comment. I mean, I will comment just because it's fine. Obviously, I work with a group, so I'm super biased towards that. Which everyone who's listening can take. It's like, all right, Evan, you sound biased. It's like, well, I am. So
it's kind of expected. You teach someone.
Suck it. But that's all right.
So, I guess the way we should do this is just let's start with. I guess let's talk about Chino Hills first because it's just the elephant in the room. There's not a whole lot to say except the same stuff we've been saying for the past 3 seasons or 2 seasons prior to this since we've been doing this podcast. Their show this year is called We Are. I don't get it, but I rarely get the California group shows. There's usually like tons of underlying meaning that go over my head until somebody explains it. And nobody's explained it yet, and I've only gotten one read, so we'll see. I'll try and watch some more streams of future regionals before finals, but some takeaways that I had from the one California regional I watched was their drum set player is awesome. So I just want to give a shout out real quick to whoever that drum set player is for Chino Hills. For a high school kid to play some of the fills that he does, it just stood out to me as a bright point in an already like clear blue sky of a show, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I haven't seen a lot of stuff from high school just because I've seen like 4 groups and that's it. Mm-hmm. Chino Hills, Arcadia, saw some of Ayala, Lebanon, and Centerville over on this side just because they were at the same show that I was. Centerville's drumming really well. I had to watch them actually in warm-up too before the regional for a while, playing through showing beats, and I was like, yeah, these kids are jamming.
Sweet. Is Fairbanks still running that program?
Fairbanks, and I think he's like running it besides, Andrew writing the music, but he's like running it. So, and then there's a bunch of dudes there that I know that are teaching. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they beat Lebanon at this past regional. I think they'll make a push maybe back in the finals this year.
I think Lebanon will?
No, Lebanon's been in, but I'm talking about
Centerville?
Centerville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm going to also make another prediction. Although they are great and phenomenal, and they are every year and have been for the past 3 years, I'm going to predict that Chino will not win this year.
Is that just like an intuition thing, or have you seen stuff?
There's not a whole lot of substance behind that, but I think that there's just kind of like the open up the door. For some reason, when I watched it, this is going to sound crazy too. When I was watching them drumming, I'm just like, I just feel like it's not as good as other years. And maybe that's just a desensitized view of like me being numb to how great they are every year, just because it's like, oh yeah, it's great again. Like, cool. And I don't want to take that for granted at all because they're these high school kids and they're absolutely throwing down. But I just feel like maybe like an Arcadia or a Dartmouth or I don't know. I just feel like somebody else might sneak up there that has maybe a better designed show that's also playing really well.
That's the point that I was going to bring up too. The show, nothing about the show design on the read that I've had of it so far has really stood out to me. And I think because of that, unless they make some tweaks or I just got a bad read or it was early season stuff, who knows? I just remember in past seasons when even the first time I've seen their show in like February when I did, it struck me as just incredible. You're just like, wow, this show makes sense. It's designed well. It flows well. The pacing is great. The body is really well written. This year, nothing really stuck out. Like some of the notes I have here are the quad feature's really hard. It wasn't executed amazingly, but again, it was February. What are you going to do? It's just the way it's going to be right now. The drum set player was great. The snare feature is absolutely incredible. It might be one of my favorite WGI snare features of like in recent memory, the past 5 years or so of any group, independent world or high school. Very well written, and they played it really well. But like you're saying, I don't think their show at this point, I think it leaves the door open, like you said. It leaves the door open for an Arcadia, for a Dartmouth with a really good show to play close to as good as they do and be able to jump them because of the GE category.
They always play so well and play such a high caliber of vocabulary and material that they are going to do well.
Yes.
And that's basically what happened. Well, they've won 3 years in a row now. Like
I think so,
They've played extremely well and also had really good shows. But it's not crazy to think that like, oh, they won't have they should have the best show every year. Like there probably just won't be years where they will have the best show, because there's also some other really incredible designers out there at that level of the activity in those other schools: Arcadia, Dartmouth, Avon, Ayala, down the list. Even some of the other groups lower down, they really design really cool shows. So I mean, it makes sense that maybe they just don't have the best show one year, and then other groups are playing really well. So that's just kind of like my, I don't know, very vague dark horse statement that I don't think that they'll win this year.
No,
maybe
yeah.
they will, but
I mean,
I don't know.
I can see
going
it.
off a hunch.
I don't 100% disagree with you for the reasons I said previously. I kind of have a prediction like that that we'll talk about later once we get more into the independent world groups. But moving on to RCC, let's get into those independent world groups. RCC is where I'll start. Their show's called I Will Wait For You, and it just came off as kind of flat. And again, I preface all of this with I didn't watch it live. The energy you experience coming off the floor is totally different. You don't really get to experience it over the stream unless the show is absolutely just up there in show design quality and effect and everything. And nothing stood out to me. I will say last year was definitely a down year for RCC. This season, they are back to their normal level of quality. I've seen videos of the snare line throwing down early season. Like, I'm not worried about, I think they've bounced back, basically, is my point. They've bounced back. The show seems better than last year. I didn't like last year's show very much, if I remember correctly. It's still just kind of a 6 out of 10 the whole time from a design standpoint for me. But the playing quality is definitely back to what they usually bring to the table.
Yeah, I think they had a green year last year. I'm kind of like a fanboy of RCC ever since I aged out, to be honest with you. I just love what they do, and I love watching them. Like, visually, it's just so pleasing to watch them move around the tarp.
There's no group that's more fun to watch move around. The
design,
the BD approach.
It's like the design is just in there. They just make it look good and feel good. So I'm excited to see the finished product and what they have out on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
I like their show. I watched like 2/3 of it, like I said, but yeah, I'm excited to see it finish. That's for sure.
Yep. We'll see what they can do. Pulse, I didn't catch the name of their show, and my preparation for tonight is lacking. Do you know the name of their show?
Nope. And I haven't seen it. I think that's the only one of the top 5 that I haven't seen.
Okay.
Or the last year's top 5. I'm not going to say they're all in the top 5 this year, but they probably will be.
Irregardless of show title, again, just kind of like RCC, nothing jumped out at me about the design of the show. It was just kind of stock Pulse, is the best way to put it. Just like RCC is kind of just like stock RCC. Some kind of philosophical undertones that no one's or few people are going to get without having it explained to them. I thought they played better than RCC. I thought they, at that point in the season, were cleaner. And I think that's kind of how it's traditionally been. Pulse is usually one of the cleanest groups in the early season.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They're a machine with that. It's kind of similar to the Chino Hills. I mean, that makes sense. But they have a system and a way of designing that is very... I don't want to say like cookie cutter, because I think that would pigeonhole them in a negative way, but they just have like a vibe to them that the kids that audition there and are in that group every year and the kids that they select can really just latch on to, and I feel like get inserted into very easily. Mm-hmm. Not to say that they don't work hard, which is of course not the case, especially if you watch them this year. I think that they're really drumming well, especially the snare line.
Oh yeah. Yep. One of the notes I have from that Cali regional was Pulse plays better than RCC overall. Something that stood out to me about Pulse's show, honestly, and I'll make a point of this right now, and I've noticed this in a few other shows that I've seen, cymbal lines seem to be getting more love with longer extended features in a lot of the shows that I've seen. And, I mean, credit to them, they're playing harder splits, and they're doing it way better than I ever have remembered cymbal lines achieving, like, rhythmic perfection. And I don't know if that's just due to them making an emphasis from a design standpoint, or a lot of these groups just happen to have rhythmically strong players in their symbol lines, and they know, okay, cool, we can feature this, we can design around it, give them a moment, kind of, because crowds tend to really react well when your symbol line does something really cool, whether it be visual from a GE standpoint or from a playing standpoint. So that's just a little thing I've noticed as an aside from a lot of groups this year. Pulse's symbol line stood out to me a lot. So kudos to them. Definitely good to see a change of pace. Usually symbol lines have traditionally been used as I don't want to say extra bodies on the floor from a drill standpoint, but they obviously add to big impacts a lot. And the features have been shorter and just not nearly as emphasized as I feel like they are this year. I don't know. Have you noticed anything like that?
I haven't seen enough shows to really catch on to that, I guess.
Yeah.
So it'd be hard for me to comment on that right now.
All right. Well, we'll bring that back up in a future episode when we do our pre-WGI finals prediction in a few weeks. So the last California group that we'll talk about is Broken City. Excuse me. I haven't seen their show on the floor. There's a lot video from about 3 weeks ago, and I will say it's kind of stock Mike Jackson writing. It's what you expect. A lot of space. He usually picks a motif and kind of sticks with it on and off throughout the writing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's definitely fair. Their shows get a really similar vibe year to year just because they use Adam Watts vocals. So the vocals feel very similar just because it's the same guy. A lot of times the uniforms are fairly similar with different color palette changes. I haven't seen the show at all. I don't even know what the title is.
I don't either.
So, yeah, I think just speaking in regards to the top five in general, I'm going to make a blanket statement that I feel like a lot of the groups are playing way better than what the design is, I guess, in a way.
They're outperforming the show.
Yeah, just because everybody's playing really, really well. The talent is just, the talent's killer. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that could be contributed to just me seeing shows that aren't finished. And a lot of these products are going to evolve and change over the last 6 weeks of the season after they're getting feedback from judges and stuff like that. So take all that with a grain of salt. And it's always different digesting a show from an emotional standpoint on a YouTube video. You can hear clarity here and there, especially with camera quality these days, but the emotion you get from live versus in person versus through a video is obviously different. So
100% agree. So my opinion from the lot videos that I've seen, I think Broken City's playing just as well as RCC and Pulsar. I think this is actually one of Mike's more meaty or beefy books. It seemed like there were a lot more notes. The density of notes was a lot higher than the past couple of years. So that's good to see, because I think the writing has been minimalistic, or has been trending toward the minimalistic side. It worked well. Did they win last year?
Yeah, they broke their record last year.
Exactly.
Which I'm still salty about. But
but so obviously it's well designed and well achieved and well performed. But I think the next level for them now is for him to throw more beef in there and see if they can do it with a higher density of notes, or if the show calls for it or whatever. Obviously you have to write based on what your concept is, and he's very good at what he does, and hopefully the density of notes pays off in spades. So we'll see.
From a drummer perspective, of course, we're gonna always like the more notes. Give me the notes.
Yeah, of course.
Give me the sauce.
But the only thing I will say is it's kind of getting a little monotonous. How many years have they been in existence? 6 now? 5?
5 or 6, I think.
Something like that. And I bet if I went back and watched all of their shows, there would be a lot of similarities thematically.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot
pacing,
of similarities for sure.
If it's a formula that works, it works, but it is, for me personally, getting a little stale. And I think maybe the higher density of notes, once I see it on the floor or get to see it live, will change my opinion. I want it to, because I really like the style of writing. And I think definitely Mike is capable of writing in different styles, but I think he's done a good job again, but it's kind of more of the same, more of what we're used to.
Yeah, I think it would be funny if somebody like overlaid the audio from like a different year on top of the video of a different year.
How they do that stuff with like country music or pop music, and they'll lay
we're gonna overlay the audio from the 17 show over top of the 16 video.
I think people have done that with like Nickelback. Like they've like overlaid songs, and the tempos are identical, the chord structure is identical, just the lyrics are different.
I mean, a lot of the pacing and design to shows in general is kind of systematic, or whatever you want to call it, whether it's outdoor or indoor.
Yeah.
I mean, or high school. I mean, how many people have an opener, ballad, closer? I mean, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So moving on past the Cali top groups, let's go to X and Mystique. So you were at the Dayton Regional with Cap City.
Yeah.
And you saw stuff on prelims day, right?
Yeah, I was able to actually catch all the groups after we got our stuff off the floor.
Okay, cool. So I watched the stream of finals. I watched Cap City, X, and Mystique. And it always is funny to me or interesting to me. Like, I watched Cap City first, and I was like, oh, I think this sounds really good. Like, you all played pretty well, and definitely are in that, like, next tier of groups as the results of the past few seasons have shown, beyond that, like, top tier 0 of X, Mystique, so on and so forth. I was like, okay, this is cool. I even texted you, like, man, you guys seem to be playing really well. I think there's a little fuzz because of the stream, but then I think X went after you guys, and when they nailed stuff, it cut way more, and I was like, okay, that's why I put you guys in different tiers still. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, although Cap City played well, there's just still a noticeable difference from a quality that you get just from the experience of the members. Like, it's just going to be the way it is. So I thought X at finals day played better. Like, the battery played cleaner than Mystique. I can definitely see how Mystique would have beaten them on prelims and finals, just because the show seemed more fleshed out. It was a little more engaging, but it was definitely kind of how Broken City seems like stock Broken City. Mystique is once again stock Mystique. Like, I will give them credit for one thing. They're playing more notes in a harder book than they have the past couple years.
I think being there in person and watching the two shows live, MCM in person read way more clearly and articulate than X did. I think part of that is just MCM does a good job of writing pretty segmentally. Like, you don't have a ton of really dense battery moments, which Rhythm X does a lot. That's kind of Tim Jackson's way of writing. When it gets really locked in towards the end of the year, it's really awesome, but it takes a while to kind of line up the verticality of all three sections, or all four sections out there on the floor, and then also the pit on top of it. But MCM, like, their quads, I don't think played for the first like 2.5 to 3 minutes of the show, and then when they do, it's like just the quads and like the snares and basses aren't in. So the readability of it is a lot more easier to digest, especially on like a first read. Mm-hmm. So that could be a little bit of a contributing factor, especially in the gap. And they did play well. I thought they played really well for this early in the season, and I thought X had a little bit more fuzz at this point than they did. Talking about like just our own group too. You had talked about like watching the three of us. We had pretty good runs at Dayton, not stellar, but I think that the ensemble this year, being my second year compared to last, is definitely more talented, and we're asking more of them from a musical difficulty. Mm-hmm. And they're handling it pretty well. So I think that that's going to give us a lot of room down the stretch to really kind of maybe rise up the ladder, which is obviously the goal, is to improve year to year. So I'm excited for us, because we're really in a good spot. Like, the show has been done. Like, we're making tweaks from pacing and design standpoint that we need to, based on the feedback that we're getting and just things that we've known. So I'm pretty pumped actually to kind of get into the back half of the season, which I guess will segue. I think that there'll be some shifting, a lot of shifting, especially in the middle of the pack there, and even possibly higher.
Yeah, so I definitely can see you guys finishing towards the top of that, like tier 2 pack, like below the top 5 groups. show design's definitely there. It was engaging. I will say I think the screens at the very beginning, I don't know if that's intentional, kind of muffle and make it hard to hear clarity.
It is a design choice by the theme of the show, for sure.
Okay.
Like, I mean, just to kind of elaborate for those who haven't seen it, the show's called The Outside Looking In, kind of about like castaway and runaways and people who are like segregated or cast out. And we have these like giant clear window panes that are kind of in the front of the battery. And it's like a similar idea. It's kind of an effect, like they're separated, like on the outside looking in, like the separated from the pit, separated from the crowd. Like if you were to watch a battery maybe play backfield in an arena, an indoor, like nobody would ever do that for you to read it. As far as like the readability and clarity, it's more to create like a texture and a design element. So it is intentional, but I think that we can also do things to enhance that from like at least digesting the readability of it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So before we move to our next topic, I want to talk about X again. We said earlier that their show's a little flat, just like kind of all the top shows that I've seen. Like they're all just kind of 6 out of 10s to me from my initial reads. And X has about 5 color guard members in their ensemble, in their visual ensemble, if you want to call it that, this season. And they've got some saber work, some rifle work, I believe. There's no flags, right? There's no flag work.
I did not notice any.
No, I didn't think so. But it's saber and rifle, and I think the guard members get swallowed up by the battery members, if that makes sense. To elaborate a little bit, like they're there, but they just don't stand out that much. Like the work they're doing is good and they're performing it well, but it's not as impactful on the show as I thought it was going to be when I early on heard they were going to have a small color guard segment in the show. And it just didn't really like stand out, as they made a big emphasis about this is going to be something they're doing. They were looking for color guard members, and it just didn't seem like it had as much of an impact as maybe they would have initially planned preseason, or who knows, maybe they have stuff in their back pocket for later on. Time will tell, but it just didn't seem like it was as impactful as I thought it was going to be. And maybe I set my bar too high. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm not going to disagree with you, but I would also say to maybe evaluate the scope through which you're watching the show. Mm-hmm. Having gotten a little bit more into visual things over the past 3 years, just with my roles in high schools and like writing body and stuff, if you're not intentionally maybe watching for that, you could maybe not catch something that's there just because you're focused on like, oh, what's the snare line doing here? Like what is like the quad line doing here? This full battery moment, like you're taking your eyes with what you hear, which is part of the show, like what you would do from an effect standpoint. But then also, like if you're thinking from a visual effect or visual performance caption, you're probably watching the show through a whole completely different lens. And you may notice things that they're doing that you wouldn't notice if you were only watching the battery or the pit or something like that. There were moments where I was like, oh, that's cool. But I don't think that it's anything that I haven't seen, especially if I'm thinking of like times when like Imachi comes over, and they've done that a lot, or Dartmouth, who generally has some of their guard members in their show from the high school. As far as just like design elements, now what they're being asked to do, I also can't really comment on because I don't know how difficult it is. Like they're doing a toss, so like I don't know the difference between a 6 or a 5 or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't know the nuance of guard. So.
Yeah. No, yeah. So we'll see. I definitely agree with you in the sense that I tend to get tunnel vision when I watch indoor and drum corps shows, and I've been consciously making an effort over the past couple of years to make myself not hone in on one segment or another and kind of watch the whole thing as a package. It's definitely one of my weaknesses as an analyst and as an audience member. I will make a conscious effort the next time I see their show, which should be, they're going to stream Indy, right?
Yeah, is Rhythm X going to Indy? I feel like they're not.
No, they're not, because they went to Chicago. You're right. The next regional they're at is Mid-South.
Mid-East.
The one Mid-East, is that what it is? Whatever.
Yeah,
the one in Kentucky.
a lot of people aren't going to Indy this year. Like, we're not going either because I think Indy is like the week right before Mid-East. So you would be like Dayton off weekend, Indy, Mid-East. So a lot of people like took that Indy off to have 2 rehearsal weekends before Mid-East, or they didn't go to Dayton. Like, for instance, Matrix didn't come to Dayton, but they are going to the Indy Regional, I think. So,
all right, cool.
Feels like they're really jam-packed. I don't know why.
I'm going to make an effort to go to the Kentucky Regional, the Mid-East one. I'm sure you guys will be there.
I'll be there.
So, I'm probably going to make the trip, get to see some of this stuff live, which will be good.
I think Chiquette and them are coming up from the old AQ.
Am I going to meet you guys? And am I going to come get what chicken place do you guys go to?
Raising Cane's, baby.
Yeah, are we going to – you got to let me know when that is, and I'll make an effort.
We've done that like 3 or 4 years in a row now. Both times they come up for the Mid-East because it's right there on 75, and then for finals with that crew, Anye and Zach and TJ and all them, we hit up the Raising Cane's in Richmond where I live.
Nice. Well, I'm going to make an effort to come there for that, to hang out. So just let me know when it is and what time, and I'll make it happen.
It'll be Friday, like 20th or whatever that weekend is.
All right. I can do that. So now let's get into – we've talked about the top groups and our initial impressions. If I had to rank them right now, I would put Pulse at the top of the pack. Probably Mystique, RCC at the 2 and 3 spot from a – they're both probably about the same level of polish and clarity. I think Mystique's show is a little more polished than RCC's is, but RCC, I think, plays a more difficult book and moves really well. That would put them, depending on the judging panel, good run, bad run, probably the 2-3 range. And I would put X probably in the 4th spot right now. I'm not going to comment on Broken City because I have not seen the show. They could end up anywhere in there. We'll see. I'll make an effort. You said there was going to be a regional you think they're coming out to this weekend?
Yeah, I believe they're going to the Arizona regional. I don't think it's on the stream, but there'll probably be videos from it, I'm sure. Like high school kids sitting in the stands with their iPhones. Please.
iPhone 37s.
Yeah, this is not Broken City 2020 on YouTube is what it'll say. I love
those titles.
I'm sure that has to do with like an algorithm thing, but I'm just like, what is going on here?
It's 100% them gaming the system. So the next groups I want to talk about are who I think are going to be in the top years and what brings my kind of bold prediction. I have not seen Matrix at all. I'm going to make an effort before the next podcast to check out what Matrix is doing this year. But I have seen through Instagram live streams from Dan Shack and Travis Peterman, there's a couple YouTube videos of George Mason, and then you have Monarch out of Texas. And I will say I like the show designs of Monarch and George Mason almost more than the top 4 of the 5 groups that I've seen.
It's I haven't seen Monarch's full show, but I've seen some stuff of them. They're drumming really well. I think both of those groups, Monarch and George Mason, are in a good spot to make a pretty significant jump. Maybe for sure, like possibly top 6, top 5. Like that's bold, but doable. I think for either of them, especially GMU, their show is fun. It's easy to watch. Yes. I feel like it's going to be like a fan favorite.
Oh yeah.
It both gets you on like an engagement level and also a nuance level, which is what you want. Obviously, I love those dudes. Love what they're doing. Dan and Travis and the whole squad over there. But I think that they're poised to make a climb up the ladder. They finished 9th last year and 7th, respectively, GMU and Monarch. Mm-hmm. So I think
GMU
they're kind of on
7th,
the door.
right?
No, Monarch was 7th. GMU was 9th.
But
yeah, I mean, granted, but when you look at the score, like you say 7th and 9th, but literally as far as score goes, they're like a point away. So it's so jam packed in there.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I think it could be a perfect storm for either one of those groups to beat Matrix and or somebody in the top 5, because both it's a weaker show design standpoint initially for the top 5 or top 4 or 5 that I've seen, and it's a strong show design year for Monarch and George Mason. I think if either of those groups can get their playing level as close as possible, if not better than the top 5 groups, that's a tough ask. All 5 of those groups are going to play really well,
but also
irregardless.
you were talking earlier just a little bit about experience. Like Monarch, I mean, like 3 out of their 4 quads from last year. Mark's like BK this summer and maybe came back probably. GMU is like a lot of crown dudes. So I think that the separation in that experience from like some of those top 5 groups is much, much smaller than maybe what it was 2 years ago.
100% agree. So you have a
and also
sorry,
no,
go ahead.
Keep going. No, you're good.
Okay, so you have a weaker show design from the top groups. You have strong show design from George Mason and Monarch. And I'll point out quickly while I'm on the topic, the intro of Monarch's show. What is that for? You don't like it? It's Broken City.
No,
it's Mike Jackson. It's Mike Jackson.
It's just so
I love
similar.
It. I think it's very effective.
It is. You can't knock it because it's good, and like you can't knock people for being inspired by other great people in the activity, like especially ones that are doing very cutting edge or revolutionary or trailblazing things. But when I watched that, and people said this about Cap City last year too, like, oh, it was just like Broken City, and I'm like, yeah, you could probably tell that there's inspiration there, but I just watched that, I'm like, there's clearly inspiration there.
Oh, it's very reminiscent of what Broken City does. But
you watch them do it, and you're like, yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, I just really like the intro, and it's definitely similar to how Mike writes, to how Broken City designs their shows. But I mean, again, like you said, the top groups are going to set the trends. Why would you not try to emulate some of the stuff that just broke the record last year, you know? So I'm not going to knock them for it. I love their intro. I think their show design is cool. I like George Mason has my favorite show, and that's not me being a homer for my friends that run the group and design the show a lot, but I think they have the most interesting to watch show at this point. And so what I was saying before, to get back to it, their show design is up. The show design at the top is down potentially a little bit. Plenty of time for them to change it. We've all known all of these groups to make later season adjustments to increase GE and show design and flow and all that stuff. I'm sure it will happen. But I could see this year being a year, and I think George Mason is more likely to do it if they can play well enough. I think the show is there and the GE is there. I also say the body, they have the best body this season out of anyone. I love the writing for the body, for the battery. I think it is easily, or in my opinion, the best body I've seen out of any show this season, hands down.
I'm going to reserve judgment. I do like it. I do like it a lot.
I think it's very effective.
I haven't seen enough.
It's extremely effective.
I haven't seen enough shows to make a qualified statement on that category.
That's fair. I'll end this topic with, I think they're going to have a strong finish.
Yeah.
Where that ends up being will depend on how good or what adjustments the top groups can make. Like you said, there are a lot of Crowns drumline from last summer, and that drumline was incredible. Just those same guys are playing together continuously throughout the winter. I could easily see them pulling an upset, if you want to call it that.
I'm going to make some like middle of the road, just blanket statements. So we're thinking like, just talking like 6 through kind of 12, 6 through 13-ish. Some groups that I think will make a push or definitely have potential to climb the ladder. Monarch, GMU, haven't seen United, so I'm not really going to say Dark Sky and us. And I will say Strike. I'll throw Strike in there, so that's 5 groups. And then I think all those groups have the potential. Well, and AQ. AQ always plays well, but their shows just don't. They outperform their shows. They outperform their shows.
Yes, typically that's their MO.
They play great. They always have. Especially the past couple of years. I mean, they beat like RCC in prelims and like performance or something like that. But those groups, coupled with the fact that I think they all have pretty well designed shows. PAL finished 8th last year. I think what I saw of them is a little bit. Wasn't quite as strong. Infinity, Wolf. Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know.
Yeah, and I also haven't seen United's show yet. So, but I think that those groups that I mentioned, like Monarch, especially GMU and us, and then like the show design is really strong. everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, you can't say your own group," but I'm gonna say my own group. I don't care.
You're allowed to have an opinion, dude. No one's gonna
Yeah,
fault you for
I think that my opinion falls within reason. Like I'm sitting here in my head, like trying to run through like intellectual things about the show. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Our show makes a lot of sense. It's difficult. It's hard. The kids are playing really well. So I'm like, yeah, we got a shot. So
I would put you guys.
Strike has been beating Infinity. So far, which is not surprising seeing those two shows. There's going to be a lot of other groups on that bubble to get in. Vessel from California was good last year. Connexes. I mean, there's going to be a lot of groups there that there's going to be good groups again that don't make finals.
Yeah, we've had this discussion since we started the podcast. The middle of the road, the average in independent world is just getting better and better every year. And you'll watch a group and go like, that didn't make finals. Man, when I was marching, that would have been like 9th place.
11th place got a 90 last year.
Yeah, that's what are you really?
Yeah.
I'm going to call score inflation. I don't know if I would agree. That's wild. 11th place got a 90.
I mean, AQ was in 15th with an 87.9.
That's insane.
It's not that crazy. It's not that far-fetched, though.
No, that's wild to me.
Maybe from a show design, but like the playing-wise, like I said, 15th place in finals, but beat RCC in prelims in performance.
In hands, yeah.
In hands, so.
It's nuts. Yeah, I'll
always shout that out, TJ. Don't worry.
I don't think Cap City will beat Monarch or GMU or Matrix. I haven't even seen Matrix. I'm going off of history of how Matrix designs really, really, really well designed GE shows, and then their playing quality usually varies year to year, depending on the personnel they're working with. I'd probably say you all will definitely finish like at least, I would say top 10. I'll be surprised if you guys don't at least get 10th. I think you'll for sure be in finals. I put George Mason and Monarch at the top of the pack of the tier 2 ensembles, and I haven't seen enough past that yet. I haven't seen Atlanta Quest. I haven't seen just a lot of those groups you just mentioned. So time will tell. We have a couple regionals coming up. There'll be a lot more content coming out online. Some of the flow marching streams we'll be able to watch to see what changes these groups we've talked about have made over the past 2 or 3 weeks. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting what happens in the top 5, because I think all the top 5 groups shows are close enough that I think you're going to see kind of a dogfight throughout finals week in placements.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think you'll see placements get set prelims night, and then the placements don't change all 3 nights. I think groups will be jumping each other depending on what they bring to the table from a playing quality and clarity standpoint.
Yeah, I would expect to see some shuffling just because there'll be a lot of really competitive groups. Mm-hmm. I did want to give a shout out just because somebody sent me this video. It was an independent open group. I think it's their first year in existence out of California. It's called like Meraki, or I don't know how you pronounce it. Meraki. Meraki. I don't know. Meraki seems to be the
words are hard.
That, it almost, unless it's a soft K like a C, it's like America. No, I'm just kidding. I doubt it's that. But somebody sent me the video of them. It's like, oh, check out this first year group, and I was like, man, these kids are good. They'll probably get bumped to world because it's California.
Yeah, it's just it's Cali. They got those crazy high schools producing good quality members for the independent world groups, independent open groups. And
just also a disclaimer for our whole talk just now. Very densely commented on Scholastic World and Independent World. So I obviously don't mind watching other shows. I don't think Mike does either. But if this was my full-time job and I was an ESPN anchor and I got paid to watch drums all day, I'd watch every show.
Oh, you better believe it.
All day long. But I just don't have time for that. So if anybody wants to shoot us shows, I'm like, hey, check this out. I'd be more than happy to watch it and be like, oh, yeah, that was cool.
That's a very good point.
Oh, that was not cool.
Help expose us to the lesser known groups and the other tiers of the activity. Because
that's like finals week, dude. It's so difficult to just get in there and watch. You have to pick a class and watch it because they all happen at like the same time.
I feel like the best way
very challenging
for one of us, like you teach somewhere, so you have to be at finals, and I want to go to finals, but I'm not spending literally 15 hours out in the lot to watch everything. I can't. The only way that would ever be possible for me to get an opinion on every single group, at least in Independent Open and Independent World, Scholastic World, whatever, would be as if I like sat on my couch and watched the flow stream of everybody. That'd be the only way.
You'd have to have like 2 streams going on 2 computers, or like mute one at the same time another one's coming on. It'd be very challenging.
Yeah, very difficult as a 2-man crew that have other responsibilities. But I think I don't have anything else to say, if I'm being honest. We talked about the top groups. I made a point to talk about Mason and Monarch, and we talked about Chino a little bit. Some predictions. I think Evan said Chino, to recap a little bit. He wouldn't be surprised if somebody beat Chino this year. We don't know who. We'll get to see some more groups throughout the rest of the season before finals. I could see it happening just from a show design standpoint. I think somebody could out-design them this year. And like I said, I think because of the show design landscape that I've seen in Independent World, a group that's not in the top 5, like Mason or Monarch, could make that jump, because I think the playing quality gap is getting closer between those groups from a talent standpoint. So it could be really interesting. I think we're in for a wild ride. I want to almost relate it to the college basketball season this year, how like all the top groups are getting beat by random unranked teams because everyone's some groups are having off seasons or years, and it's going to be interesting. I'm excited. I can't wait to go to the Mideast Regional and watch. And then I'll probably see what the schedule's like for Indy. I'm assuming they're streaming Indy this weekend.
Indy is next weekend.
Well, next weekend. That actually works out because I'm pretty busy this weekend. But so you got anything else?
I'm good, man.
All right. Well, we'll keep this one a little shorter. Let you guys get back to your lives. We appreciate the audience and everyone that listens. I'll reiterate what I did at the beginning when we introed the podcast. Hit us up on Facebook and Instagram to get all the updates on the podcast. Subscribe on Spotify and or Apple Podcasts to make sure you never miss an episode. If you would like to give us any kind of financial support, we have a Patreon now at patreon.com/agedoutpodcast, just like all the rest of our social media and podcasting accounts are, just Aged Out Podcast, no spaces. Simple to remember, nice and convenient. So if you so choose, we'd appreciate it. If not, we appreciate the viewership all the same, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with our next episode.
Peace.